Sup, this is David, and today I want to talk to you about triggering and the psychology that underpins triggering or getting triggered. So let's talk about why somebody gets triggered or angry. Now, don't you know people who, when they hear about a certain subject, or if something violates some of their PC philosophy, people tend to sometimes get triggered, they sometimes tend to get angry. Well, why is this? So the thing about triggering is never to avoid the triggering thing, never to avoid that subject, because that's escapism. Escapism is never healthy for a human being, especially in the long term. But what we want to do instead with this trigger point is to figure out why we are triggered. Why does that cause anger for us? Because for most people, when they are triggered, it's an automatic response, isn't it? It's you hear something that sounds offensive to your subjective reality, and then it gets you anger. You get into this automatic response, and there's no time to react because you're in autopilot. So we talked about this before, but between the response and a stimulus, there's a space, right? Before this response that we give, there's a space. But most of us, what we tend to do is get into autopilot zone, and that response becomes, automatic. So what we want to do is get out of that habit of this automatic response. And there is a bike with a speaker, big speaker going by, so let's let that pass for a little bit. All right, sorry, there was a bike with a big speaker and a boombox, and it just passed by. But anyways, so what most people do is they tend to have that automatic habit. It's a mental habit, and it becomes this automatic response. It becomes this trigger, not just in words, but also in emotions. It becomes the automatic emotion that they get within their body. So what we want to do instead is not just to pattern interrupt this cycle, but to figure out where does this triggering come from. And if we can figure out why we get triggered, that is the sign towards gold. So the triggering is actually a treasure map. It's a treasure map to gold. That's where you can find the gold. That's where you can find the trauma and go back to your life history, and then to release that trauma so that that triggering won't happen anymore. So we can do this in a few different ways. We can look back into that very first instance where you got this idea or we got this emotional response from. Where did that triggering first happen? And for a lot of us, it happened when we were young, when we were little kids. Because up until the age of about 6 or 7, we were in what is called mostly delta and alpha brainwave states. And in these states, your subconscious mind is so easily influenced. It's like, don't you know somebody who picked up languages, multiple different languages at a young age, and then when they grow up, they don't seem to have the different accents? But then if you take an adult and try to teach them different languages, they tend to pick up the accents. But because we did it when we were in these deep hypnotic, slower brainwave states, we naturally just seem to absorb the information so much more quickly. It's because we're downloading all of that information into our subconscious mind. And so a lot of this triggering, it can happen during our early stages, our primitive stages, where the subconscious is wide open for influencing. And if you can go back to a time where you were first angered, a lot of times you can, with some help and maybe some guidance, you can release that trauma. You can let that go. And once you fix that core, it's like fixing the earthquake. Instead of trying to heal the aftershocks, it's like going to the center of where it happened. Again, we're looking for the gold, right? The trauma, the triggering, the why, if we know the why, it usually leads us to the gold mine. So that's how we can stop our triggering. Instead of being quote unquote triggered, instead of stop wanting to be triggered, it's to dig out the roots of triggering so that we are no longer triggered in this way. So that's a little video on the deep psychological reasons behind why we are triggered and how we can go about and fix those root causes. So that's it for this video. We found value out of this one, and I'll talk to you in the next one.